Hello, hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to Making Honey, exploring lovership and desirability for women and femmes over 40 and those who want to learn from us. I am your host, Lena Queen. And today let's talk about midlife crisis. Um, One of the things that I do as both one thing I do, the lens that I come from is I often talk to people about what is called the erotic self. And the erotic self is based off of Dr. Tracy Gilbert's sex research about sexual pleasure, or what sexiness looks like for Black folks in the 21st century, right? This research was done in 2018. And one of the things that Dr. Tracy discovered is that people experienced sexiness in a way that there was 8 themes that showed up, right, in their relationship to self, right, in their experience. And the 8 areas that showed up was a person's relationship to their body. So think about, do you feel like you're too big, too small, right? Think about what's your relationship to your body from a Black person's perspective, right? You know, we think about our skin complexion, right? Light skin, dark skin, our nose, our featureisms, texturisms, like things of that nature. Think about your relationship to your body. There's also your relationship to your behavior. When I think about sexiness, right, I think about respectability politics. What's too sexy? What's not too sexy? Does my behavior, how does my behavior, what's my relationship to my behavior? Am I someone who is modest? Do I feel connected to my sexiness? What's my relationship to my behavior? So your relationship to your body, your relationship to your behavior, your erotic energy. The erotic is the energy of desirability. So when we're talking about sexiness, what we're talking about is like, how desirable is a person to self and to others? So that was the third area, right? So you have your relationship to your body, your relationship to your behavior, and your erotic energy. What is your relationship to your energy of desirability, both sexually and non-sexually? Because eroticism is not always about sexual performance or behavior. The other thing that showed up was consent, right? And when I think about consent, I think about the ability to make decisions, the ability to act on decisions that you make, what we call agency and autonomy. And when I'm coming from the space of sexiness, I think about, again, from a sexual and non-sexual space, but what is your relationship to your agency and autonomy, right? Consent, power. What also is your relationship? The other area that came up, was she had defined, because this was particularly about Black folks, this was about their relationship to their Blackness. What I found in my coaching and helping people was, even if you're non-Black, was what's your relationship to societal and sexual defaults, which is actually rooted in anti-Black racism. I know a lot of times people don't want to talk about race and racism, but we cannot talk about desirability and sexiness if we are not talking about Blackness. And if you have some struggles with that, I want to ask you to interrogate your own feelings about that. And if you want to talk some more, book me for an appointment. But for real, what is your relationship to societal and sexual defaults that tell us about what is appropriate when you think about sexiness, who has a right to be sexy, what are bodies, shapes, and sizes? You know, when you think about the messaging that you've heard and you've been taught about feeling good about yourself, Like, where are those messages come from, and whose measuring stick are you using? And it's absolutely something to interrogate when we're talking about not just racisms, but any isms. And again, societal and sexual defaults and stereotypes. The other thing that actually showed up was your outward expression of emotion. You know, in mental health, we call that your affect, right? You're having a positive affect. So in Dr. Tracy Gilbert's work, you know, her seeing that people who have this positive relationship, this pleasurable relationship to their sexiness, also had a joy, a swag about their sexiness. It was something that was seen. Ever had somebody walk into the room and you just read them? You walk into the room and you just know you're reading like deliciously desirable, you know, that's your positive affect, your outward expression of self, right? Of your emotions. Another thing that actually showed up was your relationship to um, excitement, right? Like being mentally excited about the sexiness, about what you were in. So it's about not experiencing shame or guilt, right? About being sexy. And when you think about, particularly for people over the age of 40, have we not done some work or doing some work on that? And I think a lot of times when the midlife crisis comes in when we give ourselves permission to let go of that shame, to let go of the things that prevent us from stepping into all of who we are. Another component that showed up in the relationship to sexiness was the relationship to self and others. You know, being able to say, like, there's a relationship that I have to myself, that all these other areas inform my relationship to myself. And as a lover, it absolutely informs my relationship to others. You know, so when you think about, again, the 8 areas that show up and you think about your desirability, your relationship to your body, your relationship to your behavior, your erotic energy, your outward expression, your positive affect, your swag. When you think about your agency and autonomy, thinking about your ability, your excitement into what you engage in, your excitement in what you wear, how you show up, and your relationship to others. So I want, you know, so when I think about midlife crisis, what I find for myself, what I found for people who I have supported, what you're going to find from the conversations we're going to continue to have here by the people that have been invited to have these conversations about making honey and what makes the good is being able to understand, like, what does our embodiment, our erotic self, those 8 components being the erotic self, what does that embodiment look like in our everyday decision making? What does it look like in our ability to give ourselves permission to reject shame, to reject other people's perceptions as our truth, to be able to move fully embodied in our desirability outside of other people's expectations, societal expectations. So when I find that people are having a midlife crisis, it's not a midlife crisis, it's an awakening. It's an understanding of who I am and then making decisions, hopefully grounded decisions, because we already know midlife crisis, I'll get to that in a minute, but making decisions based off of like our pleasure, our joy, and what we desire both sexually and non-sexually. I think the midlife crisis comes in when we're making decisions outside of other people's perceptions for ourselves, and we do things that aren't comfortable. I'm not talking making decisions about things that are harmful. I'm talking about making decisions in a place that allows us to access pleasure, to access healing, to act as our authentic self, our true self, regardless, again, of other people's perceptions. Um, yeah, like midlife crisis. Ah, is it a midlife crisis or are you just getting to know yourself? Because there's a difference. I think sometimes the crisis can also be too that the shame, the guilt you may be experiencing, and coming to some of those conclusions about yourself, and knowing that intention versus impact, that you could harm someone by choosing yourself and not choosing the you that they knew, the you that makes them comfortable. Um, yeah, midlife crisis. Hmm, is it really? Um, and from whose perspective? And from whose perspective? This is not me greenlighting people being selfish. This is not me greenlighting harming other people, but this is me saying like what we're going to talk about making honey and being able to be in a place to look at our desirability, to understand our lovership and like how we show up and what our relationship to pleasure, pain, and power. Yeah, we're going to come from this space. One of the, I don't know if you have read or not, but one thing I'm also a very, very huge fan of is like reading. But in Bell Hook's book, All About Love, she talks about love being, she uses an author's definition, and the definition is something like love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of one's own or another's spiritual growth. Sexuality and spirituality are two sides of the same coin. And I think a lot of times we are in a lot of sex negative spaces that don't allow us the permission to explore our erotic self. It doesn't allow us permission to explore our sexiness, even if our sexiness is modesty. And being able to discover your lovership and being able to understand your relationship to desirability. I'm going to encourage you to, one, reflect on your relationships to those 8 areas of your erotic self. I am going to encourage you to reflect on your lovership. Like, what kind of lover are you? And I don't mean, what kind of lover are you? And I don't mean in your performance for others, but I mean in your performance to yourself. Don't you want to be your own best lover? And if not, that's fine too. But I'm going to encourage you to think and to challenge and to reframe midlife crisis, because if I've realized anything for people, for women in films over 40, we've given ourselves a lot of permission, or we give ourselves permission, and or we struggle with giving ourselves permission to show up and just to be for ourselves. And that's what I'm going to encourage you to do, is to show up and to be for yourself. So that's what I have for this week. Next week, I'm gonna have some sister friends join me as we talk more about making honey and exploring our relationship to desirability and our lovership. Make sure you put in the comments below any other topics or things that come up. Give me any feedback on what comes up for you. You know me, I'm going to make it good from an informed space and place. But I'm going to make it good. So until next time, holla.